Hi everyone. Tonight, we're stepping into the smoky, desperate corridors of early 1900s America, where four immigrant brothers are about to accidentally create the entertainment empire that would one day own your childhood. Drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe light a candle for that gentle glow, and let's walk together into the chaotic rhythm of the Warner Brothers' rise to power. You're standing in a cramped, freezing apartment in Youngstown, Ohio in 1903. The wallpaper is peeling like sunburned skin, and the air smells like boiled cabbage and broken dreams, basically the scent of every startup before venture capital existed. Your name is Harry Warner, and you're about to make a decision that will either make your family rich or land you all in debtor's prison. Spoiler alert, it's going to be both, just not at the same time. Your three younger brothers are huddled around a kitchen table that's seen better decades. Sam, the dreamer with eyes like a puppy that's been promised a walk, is sketching something on the back of an unpaid bill. Albert, practical as a calculator made of anxiety, is counting coins that wouldn't buy you a decent coffee in today's money. And Jack! Oh, Jack! He's practicing his sales pitch in the mirror, convinced he could sell ice to polar bears if they had pockets. The business opportunity sitting in the corner of the room is a kinetoscope, basically a wooden box with a peephole that shows moving pictures. Think of it as Netflix, but you have to squint through a tiny window and turn a crank, and the only content is a sneeze that lasts 12 seconds. You paid $99 for this miracle of technology, which in 1903, money is roughly equivalent to buying a Tesla with your grocery budget. Listen to the sound of Harry's fingers drumming nervously on the table. Tap, 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 like raindrops on a tin roof, marking time until either success or spectacular failure. Your mother's voice echoes from the next room, speaking in Polish about how her sons have lost their minds. She's not wrong. You've essentially mortgaged your future on a wooden box that shows people doing mundane activities for entertainment. It's like betting your house on TikTok, except the app is a literal box and the content is man walks across room. The plan is simple, which should be your first warning sign. You'll take this kinetoscope to the local fair, charge 5 cents a peek, and make back your investment in, Sam's doing math on his fingers, approximately 300 years. Albert points out that fairs don't last 3 centuries. Sam suggests maybe people will really like the sneeze video. You stare at the machine, your reflection distorted in its brass fixtures, like a funhouse mirror of doubt. The weight of your family's financial future presses down on your shoulders like a lead blanket. Every rational thought in your head is screaming that this is madness. Moving pictures? Who needs them? People have books. They have newspapers. They have actual life happening right outside their windows. But then Sam cranks the handle, and through the peephole you watch a train pull into a station. 12 seconds of pure magic that makes your pulse quicken despite yourself. The locomotive seems to be coming straight at you, so real you instinctively step back. Your brother Jack laughs at your reaction, but you see him do the same thing when he takes his turn. This is going to change everything, Sam whispers, and for a moment his naive optimism feels almost contagious. Almost. The next morning, you're loading the kinetoscope into a borrowed wagon, your muscles screaming as you lift the surprisingly heavy contraption. The machine weighs about as much as your doubt, which is to say it's nearly crushing you. The fair is 3 towns over, and the horse you're riding behind looks like it's already planning its retirement. Would you bet your family's future on a box of moving pictures? Comment your guess below. You arrive at the Canfield Fair looking like refugees from a travelling medicine show, which isn't far from the truth. The kinetoscope sits in the back of your wagon like an expensive coffin, and you're starting to wonder if it's yours. The fair sprawls across a field that smells like popcorn, horse manure, and the particular desperation of people trying to win stuffed animals they could buy cheaper at any store. Setting up your Nickelodeon, a fancy name you invented because Expensive Box of Regret doesn't have the same ring, proves to be an exercise in public humiliation. The machine is heavier than a guilty conscience, and twice as unwieldy. Jack drops his end, and the whole thing tilts like a drunk trying to find a bathroom. A small crowd gathers, not to see your revolutionary entertainment technology, but to watch 4 brothers struggle with basic physics. "Step right up," Jack shouts, his voice carrying the desperate enthusiasm of a man who's just realised he might have to explain this investment to his wife. See the miracle of motion pictures. 5 cents to witness the future of entertainment. He sounds like he's trying to convince himself as much as the crowd. The first customer is a farmer who looks like he's been carved from the same wood as your machine. He hands over his nickel with the skepticism of a man who's been promised miracle cures before. You guide him to the peephole and he peers in while Sam cranks the handle. For 12 seconds he watches a man sneeze. That's it. No explosions, no romance, no dramatic revelation. Just a Victorian gentleman having an allergic reaction to modernity. The farmer straightens up, considers what he's just seen and says, "Well, I'll be damned." Then he walks away, leaving you unsure whether you've just witnessed wonder or the world's most expensive sneeze. Listen to the murmur of the growing crowd, voices mixing like ingredients in a recipe you don't have instructions for. Word spreads with the efficiency of gossip in a small town. People line up, actually line up, to pay money to look through your wooden box. They watch the sneeze, they watch the train, they watch a woman dancing in what passes for scandalous clothing in 1903, and they hand over their nickels like they're buying pieces of the future. By noon, you've made back half your investment. By evening, you're counting more money than you've seen since that time Albert found $1 behind the stove. The coins in your pocket feel like validation, each one a small victory against the voice in your head that said this would never work. But here's where the story gets interesting, and why Warner Bros. Doesn't want you to know this part. You realise you're not just selling entertainment. You're selling something much more powerful, the ability to escape reality for 12 seconds at a time. That farmer didn't just watch a sneeze, he witnessed someone else's life playing out in moving pictures. For 5 cents, he stepped outside his own existence and into something entirely different. Jack counts the day's earnings with the satisfaction of a man who's just discovered fire. "We're not just showing pictures," he says, his eyes bright with possibility. "We're selling dreams." You nod, but something else occurs to you as you watch the last customers of the day peer into your machine. You're not just selling dreams, you're discovering that people are desperate enough to buy them. The implications of this realization will shape everything that comes next, though you don't know it yet. The Kinetoscope has given you more than money. It's given you power. The power to make people forget their problems for 12 seconds. The power to transport them to different worlds, different lives, different possibilities. And if 12 seconds can do that, what could an hour do? What could an entire industry built on moving pictures accomplish? As you pack up the machine in the fading light, your hands now steady and confident, you're already planning tomorrow. Another fair, another crowd, another opportunity to sell 12-second vacations from reality. How long would you wait in line to see the world's first viral video? 3 years later, you're standing in the ruins of what used to be your life, and somehow, it's the best thing that's ever happened to you. The year is 1907, and everything you thought you knew about the entertainment business has just exploded like a poorly handled firecracker. Your travelling kinetoscope show was working beautifully until Edison, yes, that Edison, decided he owned the rights to moving pictures. Apparently, showing people sneeze footage without paying Thomas Edison's licensing fees is considered theft, which seems like the kind of rule someone makes up after seeing your success. It's like Spotify claiming they invented music and demanding payment from everyone who hums in the shower. The lawsuit papers scattered across your kitchen table feel heavier than the kinetoscope ever did. Edison's lawyers have the subtlety of a brick through a window and twice the charm. They want damages, they want your equipment, and they probably want your firstborn child for good measure. The American legal system in 1907 operates on the principle that whoever has the most money gets to rewrite reality, and unfortunately, you are not Thomas Edison. Listen to the sound of Sam pacing across the wooden floor. Creak, step, creak, step. Like a metronome counting down to disaster. He's been walking the same path for hours, wearing a groove in the boards that matches the one forming in his forehead. Albert sits at the table doing calculations that all seem to end with the same result. Complete financial ruin. Jack practices his "we're going out of business" speech in the mirror, but his heart isn't in it. "We could fight," Sam suggests, his voice carrying all the conviction of someone suggesting you arm wrestle a grizzly bear. "We could hire lawyers and prove we have the right to show moving pictures." You look at him with the expression of someone who's just been asked to explain cryptocurrency to their grandmother. With what money, Sam? Our lawyers would be defending us pro bono, and by pro bono, I mean they'd be working for the promise of payment after we win a case against Thomas Edison's army of legal professionals. But here's where your story takes a turn that Warner Brothers definitely doesn't want in their official corporate history. Instead of giving up, you decide to run. Not metaphorically, literally. Pack up everything, abandon the East Coast, and head somewhere Edison's influence can't reach. Somewhere his patents mean nothing, and his lawyers can't find you. That somewhere is a dusty, forgotten corner of California called Hollywood. The train ride west feels like fleeing a natural disaster, except the disaster wears a suit and holds patents. Your family's possessions fit into 3 suitcases and a wooden crate containing the parts of your dismantled kinetoscope. Everything you own bounces along railroad tracks toward a future you can't imagine, in a place you've never seen, to start a business you're making up as you go. The landscape outside your window changes from industrial grey to agricultural green to desert brown, each mile taking you further from Edison's reach and closer to something that doesn't exist yet, the American film industry. Though you don't know it, you're not just running from your problems, you're running toward the solution to everyone else's Edison problem. Hollywood in 1907 is what you'd get if someone described civilization to an alien who wasn't paying attention. It's orange groves and empty lots, scattered houses and wild dreams made manifest in a place where the sun shines 300 days a year and nobody's heard of patent law. The perfect place to build an entertainment empire from nothing. Your first Hollywood studio is a barn you rent for $35 a month, about what you'd pay for parking in that same spot today. The barn smells like the horses that used to live there, mixed with the dust of 1,000 unrealized dreams. But it has something your East Coast operation never had: space to dream bigger than 12-second sneeze videos. Sam sets up the rebuilt kinetoscope in the corner, while you stand in the centre of the barn, arms spread wide, spinning slowly. This, you announce to your brothers in the accumulated horse smell, is where we're going to change everything. Jack laughs, but it's not the desperate laughter of earlier years. This is something different. The laughter of people who've realised that sometimes the best business plan is having no other choice but to succeed. Would you abandon everything and flee across the country to start over? Comment your escape plan. You're kneeling on the dirt floor of your Hollywood barn in 1908, and your hands are shaking as you count the day's receipts. Not from fear, though you should be afraid, but from the adrenaline rush of realising you've just invented something that doesn't have a name yet. The barn still smells like the animals that used to call it home, mixed with the chemical tang of developing solution and the particular scent of desperation transforming into ambition. The kinetoscope business is dead. Not metaphorically dead, literally completely, buried 6 feet under dead. Edison's patents have made sure of that, but you've discovered something far more lucrative than 12-second peep shows: projection. Instead of one person at a time squinting through a tiny window, you can now show moving pictures to entire rooms of people simultaneously. It's like the difference between whispering a secret to one person versus shouting it from a rooftop. Your first projector looks like it was assembled by someone who learned engineering from a fortune cookie. It's a contraption of lenses, mirrors, and pure optimism held together with wire and the kind of determination that borders on mental illness. When it works, and when is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, it throws ghostly images onto a bedsheet you've hung from the barn rafters. Listen to the mechanical clicking of the projector as it feeds film through its mechanisms. Click, whir, click, whir, like a mechanical heartbeat keeping time with your growing empire. Sam operates the machine with the intensity of a surgeon, except surgeons usually don't swear at their equipment in 3 languages when something goes wrong. The first official Warner Brothers film screening takes place on a Tuesday evening in October. Your audience consists of 12 people who paid 10 cents each, neighbours, friends, and a few curious strangers drawn by Jack's increasingly confident street corner promotions. They sit on wooden chairs you borrowed from the local church, watching a story about a robbery unfold on your makeshift screen. But here's what makes this moment revolutionary, and why it's conveniently left out of most Warner Brothers corporate histories. You're not just showing films, you're stealing them. Not literally stealing, though the line is blurrier than you'd like to admit. but you're definitely operating in a legal grey area that's darker than your projection screen between reels. The films you're showing weren't made by Warner Bros, because Warner Bros doesn't exist yet, not officially. They're made by other companies, other dreamers who figured out how to capture stories on celluloid. The difference is that they're trying to work within Edison's patent system, paying licensing fees and following rules that essentially make filmmaking economically impossible. You've taken a different approach. Ignore the rules and hope geography protects you. Your brother Albert, practical as a pocket calculator, keeps detailed financial records that would make an accountant weep with joy. 10 cents per person, 12 people per show, 2 shows per night when you can manage it. The math is simple, but the implications are staggering. If you can pack 40 people into this barn, you'll make $4 in 2 hours. That's more than most people earn in a week. The audience watches the robbery film with the intensity of people witnessing actual crime, which in a way they are. Not the crime on screen, that's just entertainment, but the crime of showing movies without Edison's permission. Every ticket sold is technically an act of rebellion against the patent system that's strangling the film industry back east. When the film ends and the lights come up, lights being a generous term for the 2 kerosene lamps you've stationed around the barn, your audience erupts in applause. Not polite applause, but the kind of enthusiastic clapping that says, "I just saw something I've never seen before and I want more." A woman in the front row raises her hand like she's in school. "When will you show another one?" she asks, and her question contains the seeds of an entire industry. She's not asking if you'll show another film, she's asking when. She's already planning to come back. You exchange glances with your brothers, and in that moment you realise you're not just running a business anymore. You're feeding an addiction. These people don't just want to see moving pictures, they need to see them. They'll come back tomorrow night, and the night after that, and they'll bring friends who'll bring more friends. The woman's question hangs in the barn air like smoke from the kerosene lamps. When will you show another one? The answer shapes everything that follows. Every night. You'll show films every single night. Different stories, different dreams, different escapes from reality. And people will pay for those escapes, like they're buying pieces of their souls back. By midnight, after the last customer has left and you've counted the evenings take 3 times to make sure it's real, you and your brothers stand in the empty barn surrounded by the evidence of your success. Wooden chairs, a white sheet, a jury-rigged projector, and the beginning of an empire built on the simple human desire to forget reality for 90 minutes at a time. How much would you pay to escape your problems for 2 hours? You're crouched behind a pile of film canisters in 1909, listening to the sound of approaching horses, and wondering if this is how your criminal empire ends, with patent lawyers instead of bullets. The barn that's become your Hollywood headquarters feels smaller today, like the walls are closing in with each hoofbeat echoing outside. Your heart pounds with the rhythm of someone who's built their business on borrowed time and questionable legal ground. The motion picture patents company, Edison's legal army, has finally tracked you down. Think of them as the original copyright enforcement agency, except with more power and less sense of humour. They've decided that every camera, every projector, every foot of film exists only by their permission, and you've been operating without permission for over a year now. Sam peers through a crack in the barn wall like a scout watching for cavalry. 3 riders, he whispers. They're wearing suits, which means they're either lawyers or undertakers, and I'm not sure which would be worse. The films scattered around your feet represent months of work and thousands of dollars in revenue. Each canister contains stolen dreams, not stolen from other people, but stolen from Edison's monopoly on moving pictures. You've been showing films without paying tribute to the patent king, which in 1909 America is considered somewhere between piracy and treason. Jack practices his innocent face in the reflection of a film canister, but he looks about as innocent as a cat with feathers in its mouth. Albert frantically shuffles papers, trying to make your clearly illegal operation look like a legitimate business. It's like putting a bow tie on a bank robber, technically an improvement, but not fooling anyone. Listen to the sound of your own breathing, shallow and quick like a rabbit's heartbeat. The approaching footsteps crunch on gravel with the weight of legal authority and unlimited funding. These men represent Thomas Edison's attempt to control not just electricity and light bulbs, but the very technology of dreams. The barn door swings open with the drama of a courthouse revelation, and 3 men in expensive suits step into your makeshift movie theatre. They survey the scene with the expressions of health inspectors finding rat droppings in a 5-star restaurant. The lead investigator, a thin man with a moustache that could cut glass, pulls out a leather portfolio thick with papers. Warner Brothers. His voice carries the tone of someone reading charges at an execution. You're operating motion picture exhibition equipment without proper licensing from the Motion Picture Patents Company. You stand up slowly, brushing dust from your knees, trying to project confidence while your internal organs rearrange themselves with fear. We're just showing pictures to our neighbours, educational purposes. The investigator's laugh sounds like chalk on a blackboard. Educational? You're charging admission to show stolen films in an unlicensed venue using bootleg equipment. That's 3 different violations before we even discuss the copyright infringement. Here's where the story gets interesting, and why this particular chapter isn't featured in Warner Bros. Official company timeline. Instead of cooperating, instead of folding under pressure like every other small operator Edison's lawyers have crushed, you do something unprecedented. You fight back. Not with lawyers. You can't afford lawyers. Not with legal documents. You barely understand the patents you're supposedly violating. You fight back with a one-weapon Edison's empire never anticipated: public opinion. You want to shut us down? You ask, gesturing to the rows of borrowed chairs, the makeshift screen, the crowds of working families who've been coming here every night for entertainment they can actually afford. Go ahead. Tell these people they can't watch moving pictures because Thomas Edison owns the concept of entertainment. The investigator shifts uncomfortably, perhaps realizing that shutting down a neighborhood gathering looks different from stopping industrial patent infringement. The people who come to your shows aren't wealthy investors or corporate competitors. They're farmers, factory workers, families looking for an hour of escape from lives that offer precious little entertainment. Sam, catching onto your strategy, opens the barn door wider. Maybe you gentlemen would like to explain to our customers why they can't see tonight's show? Outside, early arrivals for the evening screening are already gathering, talking quietly among themselves about which film you might be showing. The lead investigator looks at his companions, then back at you. Patent law is designed to handle corporate disputes, not community entertainment. Edison's legal machine excels at crushing businesses, but it's never had to deal with ordinary people who just want to see moving pictures. This isn't over, he says, which is what people always say when they're leaving but want to sound menacing. The Motion Picture Patents Company will not tolerate continued violations of intellectual property law. After they leave, your brothers gather around you like generals planning the next phase of a war you didn't realize you were fighting. But you are fighting, and the enemy isn't just Edison. It's the entire concept that innovation belongs to whoever files the right paperwork first. Would you have backed down or fought the patent bullies? Comment your battle strategy. You're standing in a train station in 1910 holding a suitcase full of film reels and pretending to read a newspaper while actually watching for patent company spies. The headline reads, "Trust busting continues," but you're more interested in the smaller stories, the ones about independent filmmakers getting arrested, equipment confiscated, dreams crushed by legal machinery they never saw coming. Your latest business strategy could charitably be called aggressive borrowing, or more accurately described as film piracy with artistic pretensions. The plan is elegantly simple. Buy legitimate films from European distributors, study them frame by frame, then remake them with your own actors, your own sets, your own everything, except the actual creative ideas. The suitcase in your hands contains 3 French films that cost you every spare dollar the Warner Brothers operation could scrape together. Tonight, you and your brothers will watch these films until your eyes bleed, taking notes on every camera angle, every plot twist, every moment of dramatic tension. Tomorrow you'll start production on 3 completely original American films that just happen to share remarkable similarities with their European counterparts. Listen to the sound of the train whistle echoing through the station, a long, mournful call that sounds like the death of originality. The locomotive approaching the platform represents your lifeline, carrying you back to Hollywood with the stolen inspiration needed to keep your business alive. Sam meets you at the platform, his face carrying the expression of someone who's been practicing bad news in the mirror. "We have problems," he says, which has become his standard greeting lately. The patent company sent another investigator. This one brought cameras. The ride back to the barn feels like transporting contraband, which technically you are. The film canisters rattle in your suitcase like bones in a coffin, and you can't shake the feeling that everyone on the train car knows exactly what you're carrying. Patent enforcement has created a strange new category of criminal, the unlicensed entertainer. Back at your headquarters, the atmosphere has the tension of a military planning session. Albert spreads the financial records across a wooden table that doubles as your editing station. The numbers tell a story that's both encouraging and terrifying. People love movies, but making movies without Edison's permission might literally be a federal crime. Your first adaptation premieres 3 weeks later. It's the story of a tragic romance between a wealthy woman and a poor man, told with sweeping camera movements and dramatic close-ups that you've meticulously copied from a French film about, coincidentally, a tragic romance between a wealthy woman and a poor man. The similarities are so obvious that even your barn cat would notice them. But copyright law in 1910 has more holes than your leaking roof. The audience doesn't care about intellectual property theft. They care about being transported to another world for 90 minutes, and your stolen stories deliver that escape more effectively than anything they've seen before. The applause at the end sounds like validation, but you know it's really the sound of successful plagiarism. "Congratulations," Jack whispers as the credits roll. "We've invented the movie industry." 3 months later, you're operating what amounts to America's first film factory. Your barn now houses sets, costumes, and a small army of actors who work for wages that would make sweatshop owners blush. You're churning out one film per week, each one inspired by European sources that your audiences will never see. The money rolls in like water through a broken dam. Theatres across California want your films, and you're expanding faster than you can count the profits. But success brings new problems, mainly other people who want to copy your copying strategy. Competition arrives in the form of a dozen other independent studios, all running the same scam you perfected. Hollywood becomes a wild west of stolen stories, where the fastest copier wins and originality is something that happens in other countries. You're no longer unique, you're just another film pirate in a sea of intellectual property theft. The irony isn't lost on you. The company that will one day own the rights to Superman started by stealing other people's creative work. But in 1910, survival trumps ethics, and your family needs to eat more than French filmmakers need credit for their ideas. Would you feel guilty about stealing stories to feed your family? Comment your moral flexibility below. You're standing in a projection booth in 1926, sweating through your best suit while watching your company's future flicker on a screen below. The film is Don Juan, and it's about to either revolutionize cinema or bankrupt Warner Bros., possibly both at the same time. Your hands shake as you adjust the sound synchronization equipment, a contraption so complex it looks like it was designed by someone who actively hated movie theatres. The technology you're gambling your entire fortune on is called Vitaphone, and it's basically a record player that's supposed to stay perfectly synchronized with a movie projector. In 1926, this is roughly equivalent to trying to coordinate 2 drunk horses pulling a cart through a thunderstorm. When it works, it's magical. When it doesn't work, which is most of the time, it produces the cinematic equivalent of a stroke victim trying to dub a foreign film. Listen to the mechanical whirring of the record player as it spins in perfect harmony with the projector. For now. The sound is a gentle humming, like a mechanical heartbeat keeping time with your racing pulse. One tiny skip, one momentary speed variation, and the whole illusion collapses into the kind of audio-visual disaster that makes audiences demand refunds and critics sharpen their knives. The audience below has no idea they're witnessing the death of silent cinema. They're just here to see John Barrymore sword fight his way through another costume drama, blissfully unaware that their entertainment is being delivered by a technology so experimental it might literally explode. The Vitaphone system generates enough heat to roast a chicken, and enough electrical interference to power a small town, or electrocute everyone in the theatre if something goes wrong. Your brothers pace nervously around the booth like caged animals. Sam checks the synchronization for the 100th time, his face carrying the expression of someone who's bet everything on a horse race and just realised the horse might be dead. Albert calculates and recalculates the money you've invested in sound equipment, searching for a scenario where bankruptcy isn't inevitable. Jack practices his "we're not completely ruined" speech for the inevitable meeting with creditors. The gamble you're taking goes beyond money. You're betting against the entire movie industry. Every other studio has rejected sound films as a gimmick, a passing fad that will disappear as soon as audiences get tired of hearing actors talk. The conventional wisdom says that movies are a visual medium, that dialogue will destroy the art of cinema, that no one wants to hear what matinee idols actually sound like. But you've seen the future, and it sounds like John Barrymore delivering Shakespeare with perfect musical accompaniment. The audience below sits transfixed as synchronized music swells during the sword fights and romance scenes. They're not just watching a movie, they're experiencing something that's never existed before. A complete sensory immersion that makes every previous film feel like a child's toy. The real test comes during the climactic duel scene. Barrymore lunges forward with his sword, and the sound of steel ringing against steel fills the theatre at exactly the right moment. The audience gasps collectively, and you feel your heart restart after what feels like minutes of not beating. The synchronization is perfect, the illusion complete. You've just witnessed the moment when movies learn to speak. But here's what the audience doesn't know, what film historians conveniently forget. This isn't really about artistic innovation, it's about survival. Warner Bros. Is dying, slowly strangled by competition from bigger studios with deeper pockets and better distribution networks. Sound films aren't your creative vision. They're your Hail Mary pass, your last desperate attempt to stay in business. The other studios can outspend you on stars, sets and marketing, but they can't match your willingness to bet everything on unproven technology. While MGM and Paramount play it safe with silent films and massive budgets, you're gambling your company's existence on the radical idea that people might want their entertainment to include sound. How much would you bet on a technology that might not work? Comment your risk. Tolerance. You're sitting in the Warner's Theatre on October 6, 1927, watching Al Jolson's face fill the screen as he speaks the words that will kill an entire art form. Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet. The audience erupts in applause, but you're not celebrating. You're calculating how quickly you can convert every theatre in America to sound equipment before your competitors figure out what just happened. The film is The Jazz Singer, and it's not technically the first talking picture. It's mostly a silent film with a few synchronized songs and dialogue sequences. But those few minutes of speech are like a virus, spreading through the theatre and infecting the audience with an insatiable hunger for more. The moment Jolson's voice emerges from the screen, every silent film ever made becomes obsolete overnight. Listen to the sound of Jolson's voice echoing through the packed theatre, rich, emotional, impossibly present. The audience leans forward in their seats as if trying to get closer to this miracle. They've been watching moving pictures for 30 years, but they've never heard the pictures talk back. It's like watching someone discover fire or electricity or the internet. The world just changed, and most people don't realize it yet. Your brothers exchange glances in the darkness, the kind of a look that passes between people who've just witnessed their desperate gamble pay off beyond their wildest dreams. Sam grins like someone who's discovered the secret to printing money. Albert frantically scribbles notes about theatre conversion costs and distribution schedules. Jack practices his "we saw this coming all along" expression for the press interviews that will inevitably follow. But the real drama isn't on screen. It's happening in theatres across the country where executives from other studios are watching their business model disintegrate in real time. Paramount, MGM, Universal. They've all rejected sound as a fad. Now they're watching Warner Bros., the scrappy underdog, transform overnight into an industry leader through pure technological audacity. The film itself is a melodrama about a Jewish cantor's son who chooses show business over religious tradition. Basically, every immigrant family's worst nightmare wrapped in blackface and vaudeville songs. The story isn't revolutionary, but the medium is. Every time Jolson opens his mouth and words emerge in perfect synchronization, you're watching the future of entertainment being born. The technical achievement is staggering. The Vitaphone system you've installed in this theatre costs more than most people's houses, requires a team of engineers to operate, and breaks down more often than a 1920s automobile. But when it works, and tonight it's working perfectly, it creates an illusion so compelling that audiences forget they're watching projected light on a screen. The most remarkable thing about this moment is how quickly everything changes. Last, weak. Warner Brothers was a struggling studio making cheap knockoffs of other companies' successes. Tonight, you're the company that taught movies to talk. By tomorrow morning, every studio in Hollywood will be scrambling to license your sound technology, or develop their own. The implications hit you like a physical force. Every silent film star with a voice like rusty nails is about to become unemployed. Every theatre without sound equipment will become worthless. Every studio without access to sound technology will face extinction. You've just witnessed the most rapid technological revolution in entertainment history, and it's happening because your family was desperate enough to bet everything on an untested idea. As the credits roll and the audience files out, chattering excitedly about what they've just experienced, you remain in your seat, absorbing the magnitude of what just occurred. You didn't just make a successful movie, you started a revolution. Silent films didn't gradually fade away. They died tonight, murdered by Al Jolson singing My Mammy in perfect synchronization. The irony's perfect. The company that started by stealing other people's stories just gave birth to an entirely new way of telling them. Warner Bros., the patent-dodging, copyright-ignoring outlaws of early Hollywood, has become the legitimate technological leader of the film industry. What would you have said to become the first words in movie history? Comment your immortal dialogue. You're crammed into the back seat of a Model T Ford in 1928, bouncing down a dirt road toward another small-town theatre that needs converting to sound. The car smells like motor oil and desperation, and your travelling companion, a Vitaphone engineer who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, is explaining why installing sound equipment in rural theatres is like performing surgery with a sledgehammer. The suitcase between you contains the contracts, technical specifications, and bribery money necessary to convert America to talking pictures, one reluctant theatre owner at a time. What you're doing isn't technically illegal, but it involves enough financial coercion and technological intimidation to make a mob boss proud. Every theatre that doesn't convert to sound will go out of business. You're just helping them understand their options. Listen to the mechanical rattling of the car as it navigates another pothole. Clank, bounce, clank, like the sound of an industry being rebuilt from scratch. The vibrations shake every bolt and screw in the vehicle, much like your sound revolution is shaking every assumption about how movies should be made and distributed. The theatre you're approaching represents a typical challenge, a 200-seat venue in a town of 3,000 people, owned by a man who's been showing silent films since 1915 and sees no reason to change. His projection booth probably hasn't been updated since the McKinley administration. His electrical system runs on prayers and spare parts, and his budget for technological upgrades is somewhere between $0 and -$50. Your job is to convince him that installing thousands of dollars worth of sound equipment is absolutely essential to his survival, while somehow making it seem like his idea. It's like selling life insurance to someone who's actively on fire, obviously necessary, but requiring delicate salesmanship. The engineer beside you explains the technical requirements in terms that would make a rocket scientist weep. Each Vitaphone installation requires precise electrical specifications, custom-built amplification systems, and speakers positioned with the accuracy of artillery pieces. 1 degree off in speaker placement, and dialogue sounds like it's coming from inside the audience's heads. Too much electrical interference, and the whole system produces sounds that weren't in the original recording, usually at volumes that can shatter glass. Most of these theatres are wired with extension cords and good intentions, the engineer mutters, reviewing his notes. Installing professional sound equipment in them is like putting a Ferrari engine in a horse-drawn carriage. But you've seen this transformation work in hundreds of theatres across the country. Venues that were struggling to fill seats with silent films are now packed every night with audiences hungry for talking pictures. The novelty hasn't worn off. If anything, it's getting stronger. People are driving 50 miles to see films with sound, abandoning their local silent theatres like passengers fleeing a sinking ship. The economic pressure is irresistible. Theatres that convert to sound see their attendance double or triple overnight. Theatres that stick with silent films watch their audiences evaporate as customers migrate to venues offering the new technology. You're not just selling equipment, you're offering salvation to an industry segment that's facing extinction. The theatre owner, a weathered man named Henderson, who looks like he's personally fought every technological advancement of the past century, greets you with the enthusiasm of someone facing a root canal. His theatre is exactly what you expected. Worn velvet seats, hand-painted signs, and a projection system that looks like it was assembled by Thomas Edison himself during a particularly creative fever dream. "I don't see why people need to hear movies," Henderson says, leading you through his lobby. "They've been getting along fine without sound for 30 years. This is just another expensive gimmick that'll fade away like 3D pictures and smell-o-vision." But as you walk through his nearly empty theatre, 12 people scattered among 200 seats for the afternoon show, the economics of his situation become crystal clear. The writing isn't just on the wall, it's painted in neon letters and accompanied by a brass band. Convert to sound or close permanently, those are his only options. The demonstration you've brought will seal the deal. A single reel of film featuring Al Jolson singing Sunny Boy, played through portable Vitaphone equipment that fills even this cavernous space with perfect sound. Henderson watches in stunned silence as his empty theatre is transformed into something magical, something alive with possibility. By the time the demonstration ends, he's already mentally spending the increased revenue. The contract you leave behind isn't just a business agreement, it's a survival document, a lifeline for a dying theatre in a changing industry. How long would you hold out against technological change? Comment your resistance timeline. You're standing in the middle of a massive soundstage in 1935 surrounded by the controlled chaos that is Warner Bros. At the height of the studio system. The air tastes like sawdust, grease paint and concentrated ambition. Above you, massive Klieg lights hang like artificial suns, generating enough heat to melt makeup and enough light to temporarily blind anyone who looks directly at them. Welcome to the Dream Factory, where illusions are manufactured with industrial precision. Your empire now spans 142 acres of Burbank real estate, containing everything necessary to produce entertainment on an assembly line scale. Sound stages the size of airplane hangars house elaborate sets that can transform from medieval castles to modern apartments with nothing more than creative lighting and strategic camera angles. Writers work in cramped offices, churning out scripts like stenographers transcribing the American unconscious. Stars move through the lot like expensive livestock, pampered and controlled in equal measure. Listen to the symphony of industrial entertainment. Hammers pounding as carpenters build tomorrow's reality, actresses practicing dialogue in their dressing rooms, the mechanical whir of cameras capturing performances that will outlive everyone in this building. It sounds like progress, like the efficient production of dreams, but underneath the creative chaos runs a current of something darker. Absolute corporate control over human imagination. The studio system you've helped create isn't just about making movies. It's about owning every aspect of the entertainment experience. Warner Bros. Doesn't just produce films. You own the theatres that show them, control the distribution networks that deliver them, and maintain exclusive contracts with every actor, director, and writer who contributes to them. It's vertical integration applied to human creativity, and it's making you fantastically wealthy. Your contract stars live in a strange purgatory between pampered prisoner and celebrated employee. They're paid enormous salaries to pretend to be other people, but they can't choose their roles, their co-stars, or even their public personas. Bette Davis, James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart. They're all Warner Bros. Property. Their careers managed like stock portfolios, their personal lives monitored like classified information. The power you wield over American entertainment is staggering. With the stroke of a pen, you can make someone a star or destroy their career permanently. A single studio executive's decision about which projects to greenlight shapes what millions of Americans see, think, and dream about. You're not just in the movie business, you're in the reality creation business. But here's what the Golden Age mythology doesn't mention. This system is built on exploitation that would make robber barons blush. Your actors work 18-hour days, 6 days a week, often appearing in 6 or more films per year. Directors are treated like highly paid assembly line supervisors. Writers are paid by the week, not by the script, ensuring a constant supply of fresh material regardless of quality. The glamour visible on screen masks an operation that functions more like a benevolent dictatorship than a creative enterprise. Every aspect of production is controlled, monitored, and optimized for maximum output. Stars who rebel against the system find themselves suspended without pay, blacklisted from other studios, or relegated to B-movie purgatory. The message is clear. Warner Bros. Owns your talent, your image, and your future. Your most profitable innovation isn't technological, it's psychological. You figured out how to mass-produce aspirational fantasy. Every Warner Bros. Film sells the same basic product. The possibility that ordinary people can transcend their circumstances through wit, determination, or sheer luck. It's the American dream packaged as entertainment, and audiences are buying it by the millions. The irony is perfect. You started as outlaws fighting the Edison monopoly, and now you've become the very thing you once opposed. A massive corporation that controls creativity through economic power. The rebels have become the empire, and the empire is more profitable than you ever imagined possible. Walking through your studio lot, past the elaborate sets and busy sound stages, you can't shake the feeling that you've built something simultaneously magnificent and monstrous. The golden age of Hollywood isn't just golden for audiences, it's golden for the handful of men who own the machinery that produces America's dreams. What would you sacrifice for a chance at stardom? Comment your price for fame. You're sitting across from Bette Davis in 1936, watching one of the most talented actresses of her generation literally beg for the right to choose her own film roles. The conference room smells like expensive leather and cheap cigars, and the tension is thick enough to cut with the butter knife sitting next to your untouched lunch. Davis sits ramrod straight, her famous eyes blazing with the kind of fury that makes grown men reconsider their life choices. "I want out," she says, her voice carrying the authority of someone who's generated millions of dollars in revenue for your studio. "My contract is slavery with with catering." The contract in question is a standard Warner Bros. 7-year deal that gives you complete control over every aspect of her career. You decide which film she appears in, who she works with, how often she works, and what her public image looks like. In exchange, she receives a generous salary, first-class treatment, and the guarantee of steady employment. It's a gilded cage, but it's still a cage. Listen to the sound of her fingernails tapping against the mahogany table. Tap, tap, tap like a countdown timer, measuring the seconds until your most valuable asset walks away forever. Each tap represents thousands of dollars in potential revenue, hundreds of thousands of tickets sold, millions of dreams projected onto screens around the world. The studio system you've perfected treats human talent like any other natural resource, something to be extracted, refined, and monetized with maximum efficiency. Your stars work constantly, appearing in 4 to 6 films per year. Their schedules managed with military precision. They eat where you tell them to eat, socialize with people you approve of, and maintain public personas crafted by your publicity department. Davis represents a new kind of problem. A star who's intelligent enough to understand her own value and stubborn enough to demand control over her career. She's not content to be a beautiful mannequin moving through roles you select. She wants to choose projects that challenge her abilities, work with directors who respect her talent, and build a legacy based on artistic achievement rather than commercial success. "The last 3 scripts you've given me are garbage," she continues, her voice rising slightly. "Romantic comedies, where I play the same dizzy socialite over and over. I'm capable of so much more, but you won't let me prove it." But here's the business reality she doesn't understand. Warner Brothers isn't in the business of developing artistic talent. You're in the business of selling tickets, and romantic comedies starring beautiful women sell tickets more reliably than challenging dramas featuring complex characters. Every decision you make is driven by market research, audience testing, and cold financial calculation. The star system works because it reduces risk. Audiences go to see Bette Davis movies not because they care about the story or the director, but because they trust the Davis brand to deliver a certain type of entertainment experience. Her name on a poster guarantees opening weekend revenue regardless of the film's actual quality. That brand recognition is worth more than artistic integrity. Your response to her demands is predictable and devastating. Suspension without pay. If Davis won't fulfill her contractual obligations, she won't work anywhere else either. The studio system is designed to prevent exactly this kind of rebellion. Every major studio respects the other's exclusive contracts. If Warner Bros. Blacklists an actor, that actor doesn't work in Hollywood. "You can't keep me locked up here forever," Davis says, but her voice lacks the conviction it carried when she entered the room. She's beginning to understand the reality of her situation, submit to Warner Bros. Control, or abandon her film career entirely. The mathematics of stardom are brutal. Davis has achieved fame and wealth beyond most people's dreams, but she's purchased that success by surrendering control over her professional life. She can choose what to eat for breakfast and what clothes to wear on weekends, but she can't choose the roles that define her artistic legacy. 3 months later, Davis will flee to England, attempting to break her contract by working for a British studio. Warner Brothers will sue her in British courts and win, establishing legal precedent that reinforces the studio system's power over contracted talent. She'll return to Hollywood defeated, her rebellion crushed by international contract law. But Davis's attempted escape sends ripples through the industry that will eventually grow into waves. Other stars begin questioning their contracts, demanding better terms, organising collective action. The golden age of the studio system is beginning to crack, one rebellious actor at a time. The irony is devastating. The system that created the greatest stars in film history also prevented them from reaching their full artistic potential. Bette Davis could have been even greater if she'd been free to choose her roles, but then she might not have become a star at all. Would you trade artistic freedom for guaranteed success? Comment your creative compromise. You're walking through the Warner Brothers Writers Building in 1938, past rows of small offices where some of the most talented screenwriters in America are churning out scripts like factory workers producing widgets. The building smells like cigarette smoke, coffee, and the particular desperation of creative people working on deadline. Through thin walls you can hear the constant clatter of typewriters, a mechanical symphony that sounds like progress but feels like imprisonment. Each writer works in a cramped office barely large enough for a desk, a chair, and their slowly dying dreams of literary greatness. These are talented people, many with successful novels or Broadway plays to their credit, now reduced to manufacturing entertainment on Warner Bros.'s relentless production schedule. They're paid well for their captivity, but they're captives nonetheless. Listen to the rhythmic clicking of typewriter keys, click click ding, click click ding, as dozens of writers simultaneously craft dialogue, plot twists and character development for films they'll never see completed. The sound is hypnotic, almost meditative, like rain on a tin roof or waves against a shore. But underneath the pleasant rhythm is an undertone of desperation, the sound of creativity being processed into commodity. Your studio produces 52 films per year, 1 per week, requiring a constant stream of scripts, revisions and rewrites. The writers work in shift, tag-teaming difficult projects, specialising in different genres like automotive assembly line workers, specialising in different car parts. One writer handles dialogue, another manages plot structure, a third focuses on character development. Individual creativity becomes irrelevant when you're manufacturing entertainment at industrial scale. The most successful writers learn to think like their audience rather than expressing their own artistic vision. They study box office receipts instead of literature, craft stories designed to appeal to the broadest possible demographic rather than exploring personal themes or social issues. Art becomes algorithm, creativity becomes calculation. But the system produces results that would astound earlier generations of filmmakers. Warner Bros. Releases more high-quality entertainment in a single year than most studios managed in their entire history. The assembly line approach to creativity generates an unprecedented volume of professionally crafted stories, performances, and technical achievement. Your writers live in a strange professional limbo. They're paid enormous salaries, more than most doctors or lawyers, to produce work they rarely care about for audiences they don't particularly respect. Many drink heavily, partly because alcohol is freely available on studio property, but mostly because they're slowly watching their artistic souls die in comfortable, well-compensated installments. The contract system extends beyond actors to encompass every creative role. Directors, cinematographers, composers, and editors all work under exclusive agreements that prevent them from seeking employment elsewhere. Warner Bros. Doesn't just own their current work. You own their future productivity, their creative development, their professional relationships. Writers who attempt to break free face the same blacklisting that threatens rebellious actors. Hollywood's major studios maintain informal agreements to respect each other's contracts. creating an entertainment industry that functions more like a medieval guild system than a modern marketplace. Once you sign with Warner Brothers, your career belongs to Warner Brothers. The psychological toll is evident in the faces of writers walking through the lot. These are people who entered the film industry dreaming of creating the next great American story, now reduced to crafting formulaic entertainment for mass consumption. Their individual voices have been subsumed into the Warner Brothers corporate identity, their personal artistic visions sacrificed for commercial success. Yet some of the greatest films in cinema history emerge from this system. Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, Yankee Doodle Dandy, masterpieces created by contracted talent working within the constraints of studio control. The tension between artistic ambition and commercial demands sometimes produces work that transcends both. The writer's building represents the beating heart of your entertainment empire, talented individuals transforming their creativity into corporate profit. It's capitalism applied to human imagination, and it generates wealth that previous generations couldn't have conceived. But it also raises uncomfortable questions about the relationship between art and commerce, between individual expression and collective production. Standing in the hallway outside these cramped offices, listening to the constant clatter of typewriters, you're witnessing the industrialization of storytelling. It's efficient, profitable, and artistically questionable. The golden age of Hollywood is built on the creative labour of people who've traded their artistic freedom for financial security. The system works because it transforms the unpredictable process of creativity into predictable commercial output. But it also demonstrates that art can be manufactured, packaged, and sold like any other consumer product, a realization that will reshape entertainment for the next century. How much creative control would you surrender for guaranteed success? Comment your artistic price point. You're sitting in a federal courthouse in 1948, watching a government lawyer demolish the business model that made your family millionaires. The courtroom smells like old wood and fresh justice, and the judge's gavel sounds like a death sentence being pronounced on the golden age of Hollywood. The case is United States versus Paramount Pictures, and it's about to destroy the studio system you spent 40 years building. The government's argument is devastatingly simple. Your industry operates as an illegal monopoly. Warner Brothers doesn't just make movies. You own the theatres that show them, control the distribution networks that deliver them, and maintain exclusive contracts with the talent that creates them. It's vertical integration so complete it would make John D. Rockefeller jealous, and it's about to become very illegal. Listen to the sound of illegal papers rustling as the prosecutor builds his case, each page turn representing another nail in the studio system's coffin. The evidence is overwhelming because you never tried to hide what you were doing. Why would you? Until today, owning every aspect of the entertainment supply chain was considered smart business, not criminal conspiracy. Your lawyer, a man expensive enough to own his own small studio, argues that the film industry is different from other businesses, that movies are art rather than commerce, that creative endeavours require different economic structures than steel production or railroad transportation. It's a sophisticated argument that ignores one crucial fact. You've been treating movies like manufactured goods for decades. The judge isn't buying the artistic exemption argument. He's looking at box office receipts, distribution contracts, and theatre ownership records that paint a clear picture of monopolistic behaviour. Warner Bros. And the other major studios have carved up the American entertainment market like mob bosses dividing territory, and the government has finally decided to do something about it. The irony is exquisite. You started as rebels fighting Edison's monopoly, then became the very monopolists you once opposed. Now the government that once ignored Edison's abuses is using antitrust laws to break up your empire. The wheel of corporate justice turns slowly, but it turns with grinding inevitability. But here's what the prosecutors don't understand. The studio system wasn't created to crush competition. It was created to manage the incredible financial risks of entertainment production. Making movies requires enormous upfront investments, with no guarantee of return. Controlling theatres and distribution networks was the only way to ensure that successful films could subsidise the inevitable failures. Your vertically integrated system allowed Warner Bros. To take creative risks that independent producers could never afford. You could greenlight experimental films, develop new talent, and explore controversial subjects, because your theatre ownership guaranteed a certain level of revenue regardless of audience response. Breaking up the studios won't just change how movies are financed, it will change what kinds of movies get made. The government's solution is elegant in its simplicity. Studios must choose between making movies and showing them. You can produce films or own theatres, but not both. It's like forcing a restaurant to choose between cooking food and serving it to customers. Technically possible, but financially insane. As the judge delivers his verdict, guilty on all counts, divestiture required within 5 years, you're watching the end of an era. The golden age of Hollywood is over, killed not by changing public tastes or technological disruption, but by federal antitrust enforcement. The Dream Factory is being dismantled by court order. The consequences extend far beyond Warner Brothers' balance sheets. Without guaranteed theatre access, studios will become more risk-averse, less willing to invest in experimental projects or develop new talent. Independent producers will gain more power, but they'll also face greater financial uncertainty. The efficient assembly line of entertainment you perfected will be replaced by a more fragmented, unpredictable marketplace. Your brothers sit in stunned silence as the implications sink in. Harry calculates the financial impact of selling theatre chains that represent half your company's value. Albert considers the logistical nightmare of restructuring contracts, distribution networks, and production schedules. Jack practices his "this is actually good for creativity" speech for the inevitable press conference. The studio system was many things: exploitative, controlling, artistically limiting, but it was also incredibly efficient at producing high-quality entertainment. The government's antitrust action will make the film industry more competitive and less monopolistic, but it will also make it less stable and less willing to take creative risks. As you leave the courthouse, photographers capture your expression of defeated resignation for tomorrow's newspapers. The caption will read something like "End of an era for Hollywood mogul," but it could just as easily say "Government dismantles entertainment monopoly," or "Creative industry forced to compete fairly." The golden age of Hollywood is ending not with a bang, but with a legal brief, not with artistic decline, but with regulatory enforcement. The Dream Factory is about to become many smaller dreams, each fighting for survival in a marketplace you no longer control. How much market control should one company have? Comment your monopoly tolerance level. You're standing in the lobby of the Warner Theatre in 1951, surrounded by red velvet, gold fixtures, and the accumulated memories of thousands of movie premieres. The smell of popcorn and nostalgia hangs in the air like incense at a funeral, because that's essentially what this is, the funeral of your vertically integrated entertainment empire. Tomorrow, this theatre will belong to someone else, and Warner Brothers will be just another production company competing for screen time. The divestiture, forced by the Supreme Court's paramount decision, is proceeding with the efficiency of a corporate execution. Warner Brothers must sell all 701 theatres in your chain, ending the guaranteed distribution network that made the studio system possible. You're not just losing real estate, you're surrendering control over how and where your films reach audiences. Listen to the echo of your footsteps as you walk through the empty theatre, each step reverberating off walls that will soon display movies you didn't make, stories you didn't approve, entertainment that might compete directly with your own productions. The sound is hollow, final, like the last notes of a symphony played to an empty concert hall. The buyers circling your theatre chain represent a new breed of entertainment entrepreneur, independent exhibitors who see opportunity in the studio's forced divestiture. They're not interested in the artistic vision or corporate legacy that built these venues. They want profitable real estate in prime locations, buildings that can show any studio's films based purely on commercial potential. Your lawyers have negotiated the best possible terms under impossible circumstances. The theatre sales will provide enough capital to keep Warner Brothers operational as a production company, but you'll lose the guaranteed revenue that funded your most ambitious projects. Every future film will succeed or fail based on its ability to compete for theatre bookings against every other studio's output. But here's the paradox the government didn't anticipate. Breaking up the studio system doesn't make the film industry more competitive. It makes it more conservative. Without guaranteed distribution, studios become obsessed with creating sure-thing entertainment that theatre owners will definitely want to show. Experimental films, controversial subjects, and untested talent become luxury items that few companies can afford to develop. The financial mathematics of movie making have fundamentally changed. Previously, Warner Brothers could absorb the losses from 5 failed films if the 6th became a massive hit, because you owned the theatres showing all 6 movies. Now, every film must justify its own existence to independent theatre owners who care nothing about your overall artistic vision or long-term creative development. The human cost of divestiture extends beyond Warner Brothers executives to thousands of theatre employees who built their careers within your vertically integrated system. Projectionists, ushers, managers, and booking agents suddenly find themselves working for companies that may or may not honour previous employment agreements or career development programs. Your decision to focus on television production represents a strategic pivot that the other studios are watching with nervous interest. If audiences are staying home to watch TV instead of going to theatres, perhaps the future of Warner Bros. Lies in bringing entertainment directly to living rooms, rather than competing for screen time in theatres you no longer control. The transition feels like watching your children leave home, except your children are movie theatres, and they're being adopted by strangers who may not care for them properly. Each theatre sale represents the severing of another connection between Warner Bros. And the audiences you've spent decades cultivating. The irony cuts deep. The government's antitrust action was designed to increase competition and consumer choice in the film industry. But by breaking up the studio system, it may have created conditions that make studios less willing to take creative risks and more focused on producing safe, commercially predictable entertainment. Standing in the lobby of your soon-to-be former flagship theatre, you're witnessing the end of an integrated approach to entertainment that treated movies as both art and commerce. The new system will separate production from exhibition, creativity from distribution, artistic vision from audience access. It's more legally compliant, but potentially less innovative. The Supreme Court's decision represents a victory for antitrust principles and competitive markets, but it also marks the end of a business model that, whatever its flaws, produced some of the greatest films in cinema history. The golden age of Hollywood is ending not because audiences stopped loving movies, but because the government decided that loving movies too efficiently constituted illegal monopoly behaviour. As you take one final look at the theatre that premiered Casablanca, you're saying goodbye to more than real estate. You're saying goodbye to an era when a single company could control every aspect of the movie-going experience, from script development to ticket sales. That control was probably illegal, definitely monopolistic, and undeniably effective at creating enduring entertainment. Would you rather have more choice or better quality? Comment your consumer preference. You're sitting in your Burbank office in 1952, staring at a small television set that's broadcasting the end of your industry. The screen is tiny, the picture is fuzzy, and the sound quality would make a 1920s radio jealous, but it's showing moving pictures directly into people's homes, and that's terrifying. The device looks like a piece of furniture designed by someone who hates furniture, but it represents the most serious existential threat Warner Bros. Has ever faced. Movie attendance is collapsing faster than a house of cards in an earthquake. Americans who used to visit theatres twice a week are now staying home, clustered around television sets like campfires, consuming entertainment that's free, convenient, and available at the turn of a dial. Your carefully constructed theatrical distribution system is becoming obsolete before your eyes, replaced by invisible signals transmitted through the air. Listen to the tinny sound of a television commercial echoing through your office, a jaunty jingle advertising soap flakes with the same production values as your early sound experiments. The audio quality is terrible, but it's reaching more people simultaneously than any movie theatre could accommodate. That crackling, staticky sound is the future of entertainment, whether you like it or not. The mathematics are devastating. Why would families spend money on theatre tickets, babysitters, and transportation when they can watch moving pictures at home for free? Television programming may be inferior to theatrical films in every measurable way, but it's free and convenient, which apparently matters more than quality to most American consumers. Your initial response to television was the same as every other studio's: ignore it and hope it goes away. TV was obviously a novelty, a technical curiosity that would fade once the novelty wore off. The picture quality was poor, The stories were simple, and the production values were laughable compared to Hollywood films. How could this primitive technology seriously threaten an industry that had spent 40 years perfecting the art of visual storytelling? But you were wrong about everything. Television didn't fade away. It exploded across America faster than any technology in human history. By 1952, there are 20 million TV sets in American homes, and that number is growing by thousands every day. Each new television represents a family that may never need to visit a movie theatre again. The other studios are responding to television with the same blind panic that characterised their early response to sound films. MGM pretends TV doesn't exist. Paramount treats it as a temporary fad. Universal acts like it's a personal insult to the dignity of cinema. Their strategies range from denial to open warfare, but none of them seem to be working. But here's where Warner Brothers makes the decision that will save the company. Instead of fighting television, you decide to feed it. If Americans want entertainment in their homes, you'll provide entertainment in their homes. If television needs programming, Warner Brothers will become a television production company. It's the same strategic thinking that led you to embrace sound films while other studios clung to silent pictures. The transition from theatrical films to television production requires completely rethinking how entertainment is made. TV shows need weekly episodes instead of feature-length stories, ongoing characters instead of self-contained narratives, and production budgets measured in thousands rather than millions. It's like learning to write haikus after spending decades composing epic poetry. Your first television series, Warner Brothers Presents, debuts in 1955 and immediately establishes the company as a serious player in the new medium. The show features adaptations of your classic films, bringing characters like Casablanca's Rick Blaine and the Maltese Falcon's Sam Spade to weekly television. You're cannibalizing your own movie catalogue to create TV content, but it's working. The production techniques you developed for the studio system translate surprisingly well to television. The assembly line approach to creativity, the use of contract talent, the efficient use of standing sets, all the methods that made Warner Brothers successful in theatres prove equally valuable for television production. But the most important lesson from your television transition is this. When faced with technological disruption, the companies that survive are the ones that embrace change rather than fighting it. Television killed the old Hollywood studio system, but it also created opportunities for studios smart enough to adapt to new circumstances. By 1960, Warner Brothers is producing more hours of television programming than theatrical films, and TV profits are subsidizing your movie production. The enemy that nearly destroyed your company has become your salvation, but only because you were willing to join forces with the technology that was disrupting your industry. The irony is perfect. Warner Brothers survived the transition to television by becoming a television company, just as you survived the transition to sound by becoming a sound company. The studio that started by copying other people's creative work has become the studio that adapts fastest to changing entertainment technology. Standing in your office, watching your own TV shows compete with programs from companies that don't even make movies, you're witnessing the birth of modern entertainment. Television and film are converging into a single industry, and the companies that understand that, convergence first will dominate the next era of American popular culture. How quickly would you abandon your old business to embrace new technology? Comment your adaptation speed. You're standing outside the Warner Brothers gates in 1967, watching a group of long-haired anti-establishment film school graduates argue with your security guards about artistic vision versus commercial viability. The air smells like marijuana smoke and revolution, and the sounds of Bob Dylan's harmonica drift from someone's transistor radio like a battle hymn for a generation that thinks everything you've built is obsolete. These kids want to make movies about Vietnam, civil rights, and the meaninglessness of suburban existence, topics that make your traditional audience reach for their car keys. The old system is crumbling faster than a condemned building. Your contract stars are aging out of relevance. Your assembly line production methods look antiquated compared to European art films, and your core audience is being replaced by young people who think Hollywood represents everything wrong with American culture. The revolution isn't coming. It's already here, and it's carrying film cameras. Listen to the sound of protest songs echoing from the UCLA Film School, just miles from your studio. Voices raised in harmony, demanding authenticity, artistic freedom, and the right to make movies about subjects more challenging than boy meets girl romantic comedies. The music is raw, unpolished, and utterly compelling, much like the films these young directors want to make. Your first instinct is to ignore these film school revolutionaries, just as you once ignored television. They're making 16mm short films with no commercial appeal, exploring themes that would send audiences running for the exits, and demonstrating technical skills that look amateurish compared to your seasoned professionals. How could these kids possibly threaten an industry built on decades of expertise and billions of dollars in infrastructure? But the box office numbers tell a different story. Traditional Hollywood films are failing catastrophically, losing money at rates that would have been unthinkable during the Golden Age. Meanwhile, small independent films are connecting with audiences in ways your expensive star vehicles haven't achieved in years. Something fundamental has changed in what Americans want from their entertainment. The breakthrough comes when you reluctantly agree to distribute a film called Bonnie and Clyde, directed by a 29-year-old named Arthur Penn, and produced by a young actor named Warren Beatty. The movie is violent, morally ambiguous, and ends with the protagonist being shot to pieces in slow motion. Everything your marketing department insists audiences won't accept. It becomes one of the biggest hits of the decade. Suddenly, Warner Bros. Is in business with a new generation of filmmakers who treat movies like personal artistic statements rather than manufactured entertainment products. Directors like Francis Ford Coppola, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg aren't just making films. They're making statements about America, youth culture, and the relationship between individual expression and corporate control. The transition feels like learning a new language while the old one becomes obsolete around you. These young directors want complete creative control, final cut approval, and the right to explore subjects that would have been unthinkable under the old studio system. They're not interested in being employees. They want to be partners, collaborators in creating a new kind of American cinema. But here's the paradox. Giving creative control to directors doesn't guarantee commercial success. For every easy rider that captures the zeitgeist and earns enormous profits, there are 3 experimental films that lose money faster than water flowing through a broken dam. The new system is more artistically adventurous, but also more financially unpredictable than the assembly line approach you perfected. Your role as studio head transforms from dictatorial control to careful negotiation. Instead of telling directors what to make, you're trying to understand what they want to make and whether it might possibly connect with audiences. Instead of owning talent through contracts, you're courting directors who might choose to work with any studio or start their own production companies. The generational conflict extends beyond creative differences to fundamental disagreements about the relationship between art and commerce. The young filmmakers see movies as expressions of personal vision that happen to be commercially distributed. You see movies as commercial products that happen to be artistically created. Both perspectives are valid, but they often lead to completely different decisions about casting, marketing, and distribution. The success of films like The Wild Bunch, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and All the President's Men proves that audiences are hungry for more sophisticated entertainment than the studio system traditionally provided. But these successes come at the cost of the predictable profitability that made the Golden Age possible. Every film becomes a unique gamble, rather than a reliable product manufactured according to proven specifications. By the mid-1970s, Warner Bros. Has evolved into something completely different from the company your family built, a distributor and financier of independent artistic visions, rather than a factory producing consistent entertainment products. The change is exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure, offering opportunities for creative breakthrough alongside risks of commercial disaster. Standing outside your studio gates, watching young directors argue passionately about artistic integrity, while your accountants worry about quarterly profits, you're witnessing the birth of modern American cinema. The inmates have indeed taken over the asylum, and they're making it a much more interesting place to be. Would you rather have predictable profits or artistic breakthroughs? Comment your creative risk tolerance. You're sitting in a darkened theatre in 1975, watching audiences scream in terror at a mechanical shark that looks about as realistic as a bathtub toy with anger management issues. The movie is Jaws, and despite its technical limitations, it's generating the kind of audience response that studio executives fantasize about during their most optimistic fever dreams. People are literally jumping out of their seats, spilling popcorn, and planning to see it again before they've even left the theatre. But you're not watching the screen, you're watching the audience. Their faces are illuminated by reflected light from the movie, and they're completely absorbed in the experience. This isn't just entertainment, it's a shared cultural event, the kind of mass phenomenon that creates water cooler conversations and cultural memories. You're witnessing the birth of the modern blockbuster, though nobody has invented that term yet. Listen to the sound of collective gasps as the shark attacks. Hundreds of people simultaneously inhaling in fear and excitement. It's followed by nervous laughter, whispered commentary, and the rustle of people adjusting in their seats to get better views of the carnage. This is what audiences sound like when they're completely engaged with the story, when movies become events rather than just entertainment. The film's success catches everyone off guard, including its 27-year-old director Steven Spielberg, who spent months battling malfunctioning mechanical sharks and budget overruns that would have ended most careers before they started. Jaws was supposed to be a simple monster movie, a B-grade thriller that might make back its production costs if audiences weren't too discriminating. Instead, it's becoming the highest-grossing film in cinema history. What makes Jaws revolutionary isn't its technical achievement. The shark looks fake, the special effects are unconvincing, and the plot is straightforward to the point of simplicity. The revolution is in the marketing approach. Instead of releasing the film in a few theatres and gradually expanding distribution, Universal is opening it simultaneously in over 400 theatres nationwide, supported by a television advertising campaign that treats the movie like a consumer product rather than an artistic statement. The traditional film distribution model assumed that movies needed time to build word-of-mouth support, that audiences would gradually discover and embrace new films through critical reviews and personal recommendations. Jaws proves that the right combination of spectacle and marketing can create instant mass demand, that movies can become cultural phenomena on opening weekend rather than developing slowly over months. 2 years later, Star Wars takes this blockbuster formula and amplifies it beyond anything the industry has previously imagined. George Lucas's space fantasy isn't just a movie, it's a multimedia empire encompassing toys, books, games, and merchandising opportunities that generate more revenue than theatrical ticket sales. You're not just distributing a film, you're launching a brand that will dominate popular culture for decades. The success of Star Wars fundamentally changes how studios think about entertainment properties. Movies are no longer standalone products but potential franchises that can generate revenue streams across multiple platforms and decades of exploitation. Every script is evaluated not just for its immediate commercial potential, but for its ability to spawn sequels, prequels, television shows, and licensing opportunities. But here's the unintended consequence of blockbuster success. Studios become obsessed with replicating these massive hits, leading to increasingly expensive productions and increasingly risk-averse decision-making. If a $20 million space fantasy can earn $500 million worldwide, why not invest $50 million in an even more spectacular space fantasy? The logic seems sound until you realise that for every Star Wars, there are 10 expensive failures that nearly bankrupt their studios. The blockbuster model transforms Warner Bros. From a company that makes 50 films per year to one that makes 15 films per year, each with budgets and marketing campaigns that would have funded entire production slates under the old studio system. The efficiency of mass production is replaced by the high-stakes gambling of event filmmaking. Your role as studio executive evolves from managing a diverse portfolio of entertainment products to placing increasingly large bets on potential cultural phenomena. Instead of balancing successes against failures across dozens of releases, you're risking enormous sums on individual films that must achieve blockbuster status, or fail catastrophically. The young directors who seemed like revolutionaries just a few years ago are now commanding budgets and wielding influence that would have astounded Golden Age studio heads. Spielberg and Lucas aren't just making movies, they're creating industries, employing thousands of people, and generating enough revenue to fund small countries. Standing in the theatre lobby after the Jaws screening, watching audiences excitedly discuss the film they've just experienced, you're witnessing the transformation of movies from regular entertainment into special events. The blockbuster era is beginning, and it will reshape not just how films are made and marketed, but what kinds of stories get told and who gets to tell them. The irony is perfect. The counterculture movement that rejected commercial Hollywood has created the most commercially successful films in history. The revolution succeeded so completely that it became the new establishment, and the new establishment is more focused on massive profits than the old establishment ever dared to be. What's the biggest risk you take for the biggest reward? Comment your blockbuster bet. You're sitting in a boardroom in 1989 watching a man in a $5,000 suit explain why Warner Brothers, the company your family built from a stolen Kinetoscope and desperate dreams, should be sold to a publishing company for $14 billion. The man is Steve Ross, CEO of Warner Communications, and he's describing the merger with Time Inc. like it's a rescue mission rather than the end of an era. The air conditioning hums like a life support machine, which is appropriate because you're watching the last gasps of independent Hollywood studios. The hostile takeover attempt by Paramount has forced Warner's hand. Rather than be acquired by a competitor, you're merging with Time Incorporated to create a massive media conglomerate that owns everything from comic books to cable television networks. It's vertical integration on a scale that would make your 1930s Monopoly look like a neighbourhood lemonade stand. Listen to the sound of legal documents being shuffled across the mahogany table, each page representing millions of dollars in assets, thousands of employees, and decades of creative history being reorganised into new corporate structures. The rustling paper sounds like autumn leaves falling, marking the end of one season and the beginning of another. The mathematics of the merger are staggering. Time Warner becomes the largest media company in the world, controlling movie studios, television networks, cable systems, magazine publishing, and music recording. You're not just making entertainment anymore, you're controlling virtually every channel through which entertainment reaches American consumers. The vertical integration that the government broke up in 1948 has returned, dressed in modern corporate clothing and justified by global competition. But here's what the merger documents don't capture. Warner Brothers is losing its identity as a family business and becoming a subsidiary of a massive corporation answerable to shareholders, board members, and financial analysts who may never have set foot on a movie set. The personal relationships and creative instincts that built the company are being replaced by market research, focus group testing, and quarterly profit projections. Steve Ross promises that the merger will preserve Warner Bros.' creative independence while providing the financial resources necessary to compete in an increasingly expensive entertainment marketplace. Modern blockbusters cost $50 to $100 million to produce and require global marketing campaigns that can cost almost as much as the films themselves. Only massive corporations can afford to play in this high-stakes casino. The deal makes perfect sense from every perspective, except emotional attachment. Time Inc. brings publishing expertise, magazine distribution networks, and respectable corporate management to balance Warner's creative chaos and financial volatility. Warner Brothers brings proven entertainment properties, established talent relationships, and expertise in visual storytelling that can be leveraged across multiple platforms. Your brothers, now in their 80s and 90s, watch the proceedings with the detached interest of people who've seen everything, and understand that business is ultimately about adaptation rather than sentimentality. They built Warner Bros. By embracing change when their competitors clung to outdated models. The Time Warner merger represents the same strategic thinking applied to 1980s market conditions. But the human cost of corporate consolidation extends far beyond executive boardrooms. Thousands of Warner Brothers employees will find themselves working for a company they don't recognize, reporting to managers who may not understand the creative process, implementing policies designed by committees rather than individuals who understand entertainment production. The merger also represents the end of Hollywood as a distinct industry. When movie studios become subsidiaries of multimedia conglomerates, filmmaking becomes just one profit center among many. Movies that don't generate immediate returns can be cross-subsidized by magazine subscriptions and cable television revenue, but they can also be cancelled if they don't meet corporate profit expectations that have nothing to do with artistic merit or creative potential. The irony cuts deep. Warner Brothers is being absorbed into exactly the kind of massive corporate entity that you once fought against as independent rebels challenging Edison's monopoly. The cycle is complete. The revolutionaries have become the empire, and now the empire is becoming part of an even larger empire. As the merger documents are signed and the champagne is poured to celebrate the creation of Time Warner, you're witnessing the transformation of entertainment from an industry dominated by individual personalities into one controlled by faceless corporations. The age of movie moguls is ending, replaced by the age of media conglomerates. The promised benefits of the merger, increased financial stability, broader distribution networks, synergistic cross-platform opportunities, will largely materialise. Time Warner becomes a media powerhouse that dominates American popular culture for decades. But something ineffable is lost in the process, the sense that movies are made by people with distinct creative visions, rather than corporations with diversified profit strategies. Standing in the boardroom after the signing ceremony, watching lawyers and accountants organise the paperwork that transfers control of your family legacy to a publishing company, you're saying goodbye to more than corporate independence. You're saying goodbye to an era when entertainment companies were built and run by people who understood entertainment rather than people who understood business. Would you sell your family legacy for $14 billion? Comment your price for selling out. You're sitting in a Warner Brothers boardroom in 2007, staring at a laptop screen displaying a website called Netflix that claims it can deliver any movie directly to your home computer. The demonstration looks like science fiction. Thousands of films and TV shows available instantly, without physical media, broadcast schedules, or trip-to-video rental stores. It's everything the entertainment industry spent a century building, condensed into a broadband internet connection and a monthly subscription fee. The Netflix representative, a young woman who speaks in Silicon Valley buzzwords and venture capital enthusiasm, is explaining how streaming technology will disrupt traditional distribution models and democratize content consumption. She might as well be speaking Martian for all the sense it makes to executives who grew up in an industry where controlling physical distribution was the key to controlling profits. Listen to the gentle whir of the laptop's cooling fan as it processes millions of ones and zeros into moving pictures, a sound so subtle it's barely noticeable, yet representing the most fundamental change in entertainment delivery since the invention of television. That quiet electronic humming is the sound of your industry being revolutionized by people who've never worked in Hollywood. Your initial response to Netflix mirrors every previous response to technological disruption. Dismissal, followed by concern, followed by panic, followed by desperate attempts to compete with superior technology using outdated business models. Streaming video is obviously a novelty for tech enthusiasts, a supplement to real entertainment rather than a replacement for theatres, cable television, and DVD sales. But the mathematics of streaming are undeniable once you understand them. Netflix can offer unlimited entertainment for $7.99 per month, because they don't need to manufacture physical products, maintain retail relationships, or coordinate complex distribution schedules. Their marginal cost for each additional customer approaches zero, while their marginal revenue approaches $96 per year. It's the most efficient entertainment delivery system ever devised. The demonstration continues with a search for Warner Bros. Content. The Netflix library contains dozens of your classic films, acquired through licensing deals that seemed insignificant when they were signed. Movies like Casablanca, The Wizard of Oz, and Singin' in the Rain are now available to Netflix subscribers for no additional cost, generating exactly zero additional revenue for Warner Bros. Here's the realization that should terrify you. Netflix isn't just distributing entertainment, they're training audiences to expect unlimited content for a flat monthly fee. They're conditioning consumers to see individual movies and TV shows not as distinct products worth purchasing, but as interchangeable content included in a subscription service. They're commoditizing the entertainment you spent decades positioning as premium experiences. The young Netflix representative explains their plans to expand from licensed content to original programming. They want to create their own movies and TV shows, competing directly with Warner Bros. Not just for audiences but for writers, directors and actors. They're not content to distribute your content. They want to replace it entirely. Your head of digital distribution raises the obvious objection. How can a company with no experience creating entertainment possibly compete with studios that have been perfecting the craft for almost a century? It's like a taxi company deciding to manufacture automobiles, or a bookstore deciding to become a publisher. The expertise required for content creation and content distribution are completely different skill sets. But Netflix has advantages that traditional studios lack. They have direct access to viewer data, precise metrics about what people actually watch, rather than what they claim to watch in focus groups. They know exactly which genres are gaining popularity, which actors generate the most viewer engagement, and which story elements keep audiences watching versus switching to different content. More importantly, Netflix can afford to experiment with content in ways that theatrical studios cannot. If a Netflix original series fails to find an audience, the only cost is opportunity cost. The money could have been spent on a more successful series. If a Warner Bros. Theatrical release fails, the studio faces massive losses from production costs, marketing expenses, and theatre rental agreements. The streaming model eliminates most of the financial friction that makes traditional entertainment so expensive and risky. No manufacturing costs, no shipping expenses, no retail markup, no unsold inventory. Success and failure become purely matters of audience engagement rather than complex distribution logistics. As the Netflix demonstration concludes, you're watching more than a new distribution technology. You're watching the future of entertainment consumption. The physical media that dominated the industry for decades will become obsolete within 5 years. The appointment viewing that drove television programming will be replaced by on-demand access to unlimited content libraries. The implications extend far beyond distribution methods to fundamental changes in how entertainment is created, marketed, and monetized. When audiences can access unlimited content for a flat monthly fee, individual pieces of content become less valuable, while content libraries become more valuable. Netflix isn't buying movies, they're buying the right to include movies in a service that customers purchase for its completeness, rather than its individual components. Standing in the boardroom after the Netflix representatives leave, you're confronting the same choice that faced your family throughout Warner Bros. History. Embrace disruptive technology or be destroyed by it. The difference is that this time, the disruption is coming from outside Hollywood entirely, from tech companies that understand data and algorithms better than they understand storytelling. The streaming wars are about to begin, and traditional entertainment companies are entering the battle with substantial disadvantages. Netflix, Amazon, Apple, and Google have technical infrastructure, customer data, and financial resources that dwarf anything Warner Bros. Can match. They're not just competing for audiences, they're competing for the future of entertainment itself. How long would it take you to cancel cable for streaming? Comment your cord-cutting timeline. You're standing in the Warner Bros. Digital Command Center in 2019, surrounded by screens displaying real-time streaming data that would have looked like mission control for a Mars landing to executives from previous decades. The room smells like coffee, anxiety, and the particular desperation of a traditional media company trying to reinvent itself before newer, more agile competitors make it irrelevant. The numbers on those screens tell a story that's both encouraging and terrifying. Warner Bros. Content is massively popular on streaming platforms, but most of the money is going to Netflix, Amazon, and other tech companies, rather than the creators of the content. The solution, according to the consultants you've hired at fees that could fund entire film productions, is to launch your own streaming service. HBO Max will combine Warner Bros. Film catalogue, HBO's premium programming, and content from across the Warner Media universe into a single platform designed to compete directly with Netflix, Disney+, and every other tech company that's decided entertainment is just another software product. Listen to the constant clicking of keyboards as teams of engineers work to build streaming infrastructure that can handle millions of simultaneous users watching different content without the system collapsing like a house of cards in an earthquake. The sound is continuous, urgent, like digital rain falling on a technological roof that hasn't been tested in a real storm. The mathematics of streaming competition are brutal. Netflix spends $17 billion annually on original content, more than Warner Bros.' entire corporate revenue just a few years ago. Disney Plus launched with the entire Disney catalogue plus new Star Wars and Marvel content, instantly attracting 50 million subscribers who were previously paying to see the content in theatres. Amazon Prime Video is essentially free for Prime members, subsidised by profits from selling everything else on Earth. Your competitive advantage, according to the business plan, is Warner Bros.' deep catalogue of beloved content spanning nearly a century of entertainment. HBO Max will be the exclusive streaming home for Friends, The Big Bang Theory, Game of Thrones, the DC superhero universe, and hundreds of classic Warner Bros. Films. It's a content library that no startup streaming service could possibly match. But here's the problem that keeps you awake at night. You're competing against companies that treat streaming video as one small component of much larger technology ecosystems. Amazon can afford to lose money on Prime Video because it drives sales of other products. Apple can subsidize Apple TV Plus with profits from iPhone sales. Google could launch a streaming service tomorrow funded entirely by search advertising revenue. Netflix is the only pure streaming competitor, and they have a 7-year head start building the technology and audience relationships you're trying to replicate. The development costs are staggering in ways that Golden Age studio executives couldn't have imagined. Building streaming technology requires not just content creation expertise, but software development, data analytics, customer service operations, and the kind of technical infrastructure typically associated with major tech companies rather than entertainment studios. You're not just making movies anymore, you're running a technology platform that happens to show movies. A content strategy meeting feels like a war council planning for asymmetric warfare. Netflix releases new original content weekly, training audiences to expect constant novelty. Disney Plus focuses on family-friendly content that generates decades of merchandising revenue. HBO Max needs to differentiate itself in a marketplace where every streaming service is promising unlimited entertainment for roughly the same monthly fee. Your solution is to position HBO Max as the premium streaming service, offering not just quantity but quality. Fewer titles than Netflix, but higher production values, more prestigious projects, better writing and acting talent. It's the same strategy HBO used to compete with network television, applied to the streaming marketplace. But premium positioning comes with premium problems. Higher quality content costs significantly more to produce, requiring larger budgets for smaller catalogues. Meanwhile, audiences are increasingly trained to expect vast libraries of content rather than carefully curated selections. The Netflix model has taught consumers that good enough content available immediately is better than great content available occasionally. The launch strategy involves removing Warner Bros. Content from competitors' platforms, forcing audiences to choose between maintaining their existing streaming subscriptions or switching to HBO Max for exclusive access to your content. It's a risky move that could alienate audiences who've grown accustomed to finding Warner Bros. Content on whatever streaming service they prefer. The technical complexity of streaming launches becomes apparent during the first week, when millions of users trying to watch Wonder Woman 1984 simultaneously cause system crashes that generate more negative publicity than the film's reviews. Building streaming. Infrastructure capable of handling peak demand requires the kind of technical expertise that Warner Bros. Spent a century not developing. 6 months after launch, HBO Max has attracted 12 million subscribers, a respectable number that falls far short of the projections used to justify the billions spent on development and marketing. The service is profitable in some markets, breaking even in others, and losing money in territories where building audience awareness requires marketing campaigns that cost more than the subscription revenue they generate. But the deeper challenge isn't technical or financial, it's cultural. Warner Bros. Is attempting to transform from a content creation company into a technology platform requiring different skills, different management approaches, and different ways of thinking about audiences. You're competing against companies founded by computer programmers who learned entertainment versus entertainment companies trying to learn computer programming. Standing in the digital command center, watching real-time data flow across screens displaying global streaming metrics, you're witnessing Warner Bros.' latest reinvention. The company that survived the transition from silent films to talkies, from theatres to television, from physical media to digital distribution, is now attempting to survive the transition from selling entertainment to subscriptions offering unlimited entertainment. The streaming wars represent more than competition between platforms. They represent a fundamental shift in how audiences relate to entertainment. When content becomes unlimited and instantly available, individual movies and shows become less valuable, while access to everything becomes more valuable. Warner Bros. Isn't just launching a streaming service. You're adapting to an entertainment economy where abundance is the baseline expectation and scarcity is a marketing strategy rather than a natural constraint. How many streaming subscriptions would you pay for simultaneously? Comment your subscription limit. You're sitting in a conference room in 2022, listening to David Zaslav, CEO of Discovery Communications, explain why Warner Bros., the company that gave birth to talking pictures, needs to be rescued from the entertainment business by people who understand the reality television business. The merger documents spread across the table represent the latest chapter in Warner Bros.' century-long story of survival through adaptation, but this time the adaptation might require abandoning everything that made the company worth preserving in the first place. The numbers justifying the merger tell a familiar story of technological disruption and changing consumer preferences. Traditional theatrical releases are generating diminishing returns, while streaming content consumption continues accelerating. Discovery's portfolio of unscripted programming shows about people catching fish, renovating houses and surviving in wilderness. Locations, attracts larger audiences and costs significantly less to produce than Warner Bros. Blockbuster films and prestige television series. Listen to the sound of calculators clicking as financial analysts compare the production costs of a $200 million superhero film versus a $2 million film reality series about cake decorating competition. The mathematics are unforgiving. Reality television generates higher profit margins, requires no celebrity salaries, and can be produced continuously without the complex scheduling required for scripted entertainment. The merger creates Warner Bros. Discovery, a company that owns everything from Batman to 90 Day Fiancé, from Game of Thrones to My 600-Pound Life. It's vertical integration applied to the attention economy, combining premium scripted content with mass-market unscripted programming to create a media portfolio designed to capture every demographic and viewing occasion. But Zaslav's cost-cutting strategy reveals the true priorities of the new corporate structure. Expensive scripted development is cancelled or shelved, including completed films that will never be released because their marketing costs can't be justified against projected returns. The company that once bet everything on unproven sound technology is now unwilling to risk releasing finished movies if the financial projections aren't sufficiently optimistic. The most shocking casualty is Batgirl, a completed $90 million superhero film starring Leslie Grace, which is cancelled not because it's poorly made, but because releasing it would require additional marketing expenses without sufficient potential profit to justify the investment. The decision to shelve a finished film for tax purposes represents a new low in the relationship between art and commerce, even for a company accustomed to treating creativity as a product. Your role as a Warner Bros. Executive transforms from developing entertainment to managing intellectual property assets that can be exploited across multiple platforms and formats. Batman isn't just a character, it's a franchise opportunity that can generate revenue through films, television series, streaming content, merchandising, theme park attractions, and licensing deals. Every creative decision is evaluated not for artistic merit, but for its ability to maximize the value of existing intellectual property. The streaming strategy shifts from competing with Netflix through premium original content to competing through cost efficiency and content volume. Instead of spending $200 million on a single prestige series, Warner Bros. Discovery can produce dozens of reality shows that collectively attract larger audiences at significantly lower costs. The math is irrefutable, even if the cultural implications are depressing. But here's the paradox that the new management doesn't fully understand. Warner Bros.' most valuable intellectual properties were created by people who cared more about storytelling than profit maximization. Casablanca, Batman, The Wizard of Oz. These properties became culturally significant because they were made by artists working within commercial constraints, not by accountants optimizing return on investment. The creative talent exodus begins immediately after the merger announcement. Directors, writers, and producers who built careers within the Warner Bros. Ecosystem migrate to companies that still prioritize scripted entertainment over reality television. Netflix, Amazon, Apple, and other tech companies become beneficiaries of Warner Bros.' cost-cutting strategy, acquiring talent that might have created the next generation of Warner-owned intellectual property. The irony is devastating. In attempting to save Warner Bros. Through merger with Discovery, the new management may be destroying the creative culture that made Warner Bros. Worth acquiring. The company survives, but loses its identity, maintaining the name while abandoning the mission that justified the name's existence. The merger represents the logical endpoint of treating entertainment as a commodity rather than an art form. When every creative decision is subjected to financial optimization, creativity becomes predictable, safe, and ultimately irrelevant to audiences seeking authentic emotional experiences. Reality television succeeds not because it's better entertainment than scripted drama, but because it's cheaper entertainment that can be produced quickly and at scale. Standing in the conference room after the merger documents are signed, you're witnessing more than corporate reorganization. You're watching the transformation of Warner Brothers from an entertainment company into a content management business. The studio that taught movies to talk is becoming a company that talks about content rather than creating it. The streaming wars have forced every entertainment company to choose between artistic ambition and financial efficiency. Warner Brothers Discovery has chosen efficiency, betting that audiences will accept cheaper content if it's delivered more consistently and at lower subscription prices. It's a defensible business strategy that abandons everything Warner Brothers historically represented. The merger may save Warner Brothers as a corporate entity, while killing it as a creative force. The company will survive, but the version that survives may be unrecognizable to anyone who remembers when Warner Brothers was synonymous with innovation, risk-taking, and the belief that entertainment could be both artistically meaningful and commercially successful. The golden age of Hollywood ended with government antitrust action. The streaming age of Hollywood may end with private equity optimization, a quieter death, but equally final in its implications for the relationship between art and commerce in American popular culture. Would you rather own a profitable content library or create new cultural classics? Comment your entertainment legacy choice. You've spent the last hour watching the rise and fall of Warner Brothers, a company that survived every technological revolution by becoming something completely different, while somehow remaining essentially the same. From stolen kinetoscopes to streaming algorithms, from four brothers in a barn to multinational media conglomerate, the story is really about adaptation. The willingness to abandon everything you think you know about your business when the world changes around you. The Warner Brothers who started with a sneeze video and a gambling addiction would probably recognize the executives currently managing their legacy. People making desperate bets on unproven technology, fighting larger competitors with superior resources, and discovering that survival in the entertainment industry requires equal measures of creativity and ruthlessness. What they might not recognize is an industry where creativity has become completely subordinated to data analysis, where every story is evaluated for its ability to generate merchandise revenue, and where the most successful entertainment companies are run by people who've never told a story that wasn't designed by algorithm and focus grouped into commercial viability. But then again, they might not be surprised at all. The Warner Brothers built their empire by stealing other people's creative work, controlling every aspect of talent development, and prioritizing profit over artistic integrity whenever the two came into conflict. The difference between then and now might be less dramatic than it appears from inside the nostalgic mythology of Hollywood's golden age. The real question isn't whether Warner Brothers will survive the current round of technological disruption. The company has proven remarkably adaptable over its century-long existence. The question is whether the version that survives will bear any meaningful resemblance to the studio that created Casablanca, Singin' in the Rain, and The Dark Knight, or whether it will become just another content optimization business that happens to own some valuable intellectual property from back when movies were made by people who cared about movies. The streaming wars aren't over. Artificial intelligence is already changing how content is created and distributed, and the next technological revolution is probably being developed in some garage or dorm room by someone who thinks the current entertainment industry is as obsolete as the Warner Brothers thought Edison's patents were in 1910. Warner Brothers will adapt to whatever comes next because that's what Warner Brothers does. Whether the adaptation will result in something worth preserving is the question that each generation of entertainment executives must answer for themselves. The brothers who taught movies to talk would probably be impressed by the global reach and technological sophistication of modern Warner Brothers, but they might also wonder what happened to the desperate creativity, the willingness to risk everything on an untested idea, and the belief that entertainment could change the world rather than just optimize engagement metrics. That's the real secret Warner Brothers doesn't want you to know. The golden age wasn't golden because the executives were more artistic, or the audiences were more sophisticated. It was golden because survival required constant innovation, creative risk-taking, and the understanding that entertainment is ultimately about human connection rather than content consumption. The future of Warner Bros., and of entertainment in general, depends on whether anyone still remembers that lesson,